Hello everyone, my name is Jesse Februaruy. I'm a Women International Master from South Africa. I'll be bringing you all the spice from the Candidates Tournament. A big thank you to Lichess for this opportunity, and a special thanks to our annotator Nijat Abasov for providing insight from a Grandmaster's perspective. Just a reminder about the format of this year's Candidates. There are a total of 8 players, which means 14 games, being a double round robin, and the time control is 120 minutes for the first 40 moves, 60 minutes for the next 20 moves, and 15 minutes for the rest of the game. And surprise, surprise, the 30-second increment only starts on move 61. A lot of exciting things happened in round 1, with 3 games out of book by move 8 to 10, according to the Masters database. It goes without saying that Rajabov is known as a creative attacking player, and Duda also has his moments of considered aggression, so this game promised to be interesting and possibly unconventional. Duda was unable to convert his advantage. He probably felt the tension of it being his first ever Candidates. Otherwise, many suggest he would have won quite easily. But let's take a look. The game started as a Sicilian Khan, with bishop already being a super rare move. In fact, in top level, it was tested but only once by Rajabov himself with white against Caruana in St. Louis 2021. The novelty came as early as move 7 with bishop to d3. Black was planning on fianchettoing the bishop with g6, but was a bit too much for the given position, as it weakened a lot of the dark squares. Duda immediately took advantage of it by playing a powerful c5 move. Position of black was already shaky. On move 16, Duda, not typically for his style, spent quite a lot of time recapturing on d1, but with the bishop. Rook takes d1 would be very strong, as after bishop takes a2, most likely that was the reason why Duda wanted to keep the rook on a1. Then Duda started playing too cautiously, missing numerous possibilities of taking a serious initiative. On move 25, king f1 was considered a little bit too slow, whilst b4 could have given him a good initiative on the queen side. Black perhaps should give the bishop pair with a takes b4, knight takes b4, bishop takes b4, and a takes b4. But again, black's dark squares are too weakened, and the e3 bishop becomes almighty. On move 34, king c6, black surprisingly could have turned things around and maybe started to play for initiative. The point is, with getting the king to c6, black opens the b file for the rook, and after knight d5, rook b8, black's position looks at least not worse. All in all, Duda was considered to be too cautious this game, and definitely could have found the initiative. The Berlin defense is not drawn. The Berlin defense is not drawn if you are Fabiano Caruana. An all-American showdown, as Candidates veteran Fabiano Caruana played Nakamura, who recently came out of an OTB hiatus. They're also no strangers to each other, with at least 46 encounters, slightly in Caruana's favor by 1 win. Caruana opened with e4. Nakamura opted for the Berlin defense, made famous by Krumnik, as a consistent drawing line for black. A series of careful maneuvering moves later, Caruana had a clear advantage with a classical, surgical fashion. It was only a matter of time before Nakamura was dispatched. Both sides were following the game of the other 2 American players, Ray Robson versus Dominguez from the US Championship in 2019. It was Hikaru who first deviated with move 9, which I believe was rook b8 here, and in the aforementioned game, black chose long castles instead. After 12 minutes of thinking, Fabi finds, or remembers rather, the most principled continuation. bishop g5, and black gets tempted to advance queenside pawns with h6 and g5. But now the question arises, where to castle? Since black's queenside rook is no longer on a8 and the kingside pawns are no longer in their original places. White continues to play positionally and tends to break the center with d4. White most likely could have won a pawn here with 17 queen c3, as in the case g4, knight takes c5, bishop b4, and white has queen e3, and so on. It's hard to say exactly what Caruana disliked in queen c3, but after his move, black's position seemed okay. Later on, castling came as a huge shocker. You'd expect Naka to play king d7 here, taking the king to the queenside. But castling kingside was definitely unexpected. Best would have been h4, continuing with the original plan. The game could continue with f4, e takes f4, rook takes f4, king d7, followed by rook h, f8, and likely end in a draw. But after f3, white took the initiative with the number of good moves reached, practically and I suppose technically winning the position on move 29. So let's get there real quickly, just so that you can see exactly when that happened. So I believe c takes d5 was the moment, despite the fact that materially it's equal, not many pieces remaining on the board. Black's e4 and g4 pawns are extremely weak. Black's king is on g8, it's vulnerable too, and on top of that, white's knight is better than black's bishop. Later in time trouble, Fabi missed some direct wins, but the evaluation of the position never changed. Liren opted for the English, and as Feingold would say, c4 is a potentially explosive opening. The players went down a line less travelled early on, and with Liren maintaining a typical small advantage white has in the opening. Until move 10, they followed the game Anish Giri versus Alexander Greshuk from the candidates 2020-2021. In that game, black chose an ambitious h5, but after d4, e takes d3, e takes d3, queen d4, knight c2, knight g4, queens were traded off soon, and black's attack didn't really happen. Game still ended in a draw, however, but after castles, Nepo did play what looks much more natural. With knight g4, he showed his clear intentions of attacking white's king. On move 14, white spent 20 minutes and played h4. Meanwhile, knight takes g4, bishop takes g4 looked like it was working. Black clearly had some compensation for the pawn, but most likely it should not be enough. On move 17, b5 could potentially lead to a comfortable position for white, but after knight a4, bishop takes b2, knight takes b2, knight c7, knight c4, rook e6, suddenly black's ready to attack the kingside with g5, etc. After move 21, black's move h6, white panicked and played queen to d2. That is extremely difficult to explain. More natural was rook a d8, and in the case of g5, white has rook takes d5, c takes d5, rook takes d5, g takes a4, and knight d6. I hope you have a board in handy in case you didn't catch that. And white manages to neutralize black's attack. The position should be equal. But from now on, white's each move worsens the position even more. King h2 was the first move off, but the losing move came on move 26. White could still try to survive with b5, g takes h4, etc., but white had knight takes c6 instead. White went knight takes b7, and after g takes h4, there was no way back anymore. Next up, we're going to take a look at Rajabov versus Farouza, with Rajabov having the white pieces. Rajabov recently has seemed to have a slump in form, so it was difficult to know what to expect from him. Likewise, Farouza has been preparing away from the chess circuit with very little recent play, like some kind of kung fu master meditating in solitude. Overall, the game seemed to be a little nervy from Farouza, perhaps easing himself back into the saddle. Farouza seemed to be pushing more for a win, and at stages, Rajabov seemed to be more on the back foot. But ultimately, Rajabov's defenses were sufficient, or Farouza's attacks weren't quite pressing enough, and neither seemed at any serious risk of losing. The opening choice by Farouza was quite brave, assumably. Considering Rajabov's late performance in Norway, I assume Farouza wanted to enter a double-edged position out of the opening. I'm not sure whether the Vienna came as a surprise or not, since it's already happened in a blitz game between Rajabov and Farouza at the Grand Chess Tour in Paris 2021. In this game, the novelty only came after Black's 14th move. White reacted naturally and wanted to keep the control over the situation. Black continued blitzing out the moves, and the key moment was move 17. Knight to f4. Black could have gone with a solid knight b6 instead, but Alireza's move was much more ambitious. After bishop takes c4, Black sacrificed the exchange for the bishop pair, and mostly dominated over the light squares. With a 45-minute gap on the clock, Black was most likely still in prep. White's 20th move, rook c1, was a sound draw offer. In this particular position, knight d3, queen c3, knight takes c1, queen takes c4, queen d5 looks a bit more natural. But Alireza continued his original plan of bringing his pieces onto the h1 a8 diagonal, putting pressure on the king side. But then, White played back-to-back really strong moves. After h4, it was already unclear who is first to attack the king side. Alireza started to spend quite a bit of time here, and the advantage on the clock was gone. His position looked a bit shaky, too. According to the engine, bishop takes e4, knight takes c4, knight h4 was good, but trust me, allowing h6 is so counterintuitive. I believe no human ever would react this way in the given position. Alireza, however, found quite an interesting way of handling the position by getting the king out of the danger zone. So after king to e8, it's obvious White has to be better. But there's no clear path to improving the position. With 5 minutes left on 10 moves, White's moves seem natural, but after knight to e4 and bishop takes e4, Black manages to stabilize. The rook endgame was always drawn.